All right, so what are we doing?
Well, so part of this is talking through what we're doing. You know, we both have started our own things, and I think we want to talk a little bit about that, and then talk about why we're coming together in this forum, which is really going to be live streaming, podcast, YouTube stream. I mean, kind of you name it, and talk through what that's going to look like. And I can tell anybody who's listening, coming up with a name seems to be about the hardest thing, the biggest challenge we've had so far.
Oh my goodness, that session we had yesterday with Rachel to try to figure out the names. Oh my goodness, I felt bad for her because it was like, 30 minutes of blank stares, and then random word generation websites and stuff like that. I think, kind of following the lines of tech, maybe it's just minimum viable product. I mean, that's exactly what we've put together right now is minimum viable product. But at times you just have to start that way. So maybe it's this.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to that idea, right? Not everything has to be perfect. Certainly not on social media. I mean, things come and go, and at some point you just got to go, right? Because otherwise, what is analysis by paralysis is what you say usually. So, also, if you're out there, we'd love to hear from you in the comments section. If you want to let us know where you're listening from, or if you have any questions during the show, we're gonna be making this, I think, either twice a week, Kevin, or minimum once a week. We'll start having a pretty standardized time, and I think it'll end up being a little bit later in the day, but we wanted to get this one out today early.
Another tip, set the bar low and then overperform or outperform or what have you. But now eventually we'll get to 5 days a week.
Okay. All right. Well, that's setting the bar very high.
Yeah. No, maybe not that, but I just want to make sure that you're not going to have me start doing TikToks and all that stuff, because that's where I draw the line with this stuff. But I think really what this is all about is kind of behind the scenes sneak peek into building the next thing, building the next business, the next technology. I think part of it is mentoring and looking at what it takes to help an organization succeed and achieve velocity. And so, Matt and I started talking about this maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that. Thought it'd be really cool to go behind the scenes and help Matt through his journey of building out his business and seeing what tips and guidance and advice that I can share. We've had a couple of really funny moments along the way, the last 2 weeks, where Matt's asking about, well, what are checks? How do I use checks?
Wow.
How to make deposit?
All right, you're exaggerating quite a bit there.
That's what it sounded like to me anyway. But no, So the goal behind this is to take a sneak peek behind Matt building out his practice, what I'm doing on my consulting side, and see where things go over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and beyond.
Yeah, and I know we'll also be hearing from thought leaders, not just in the MSP space, but really in the overall channel and outside of the channel. Like we really want to bring in people who perhaps this audience hasn't really heard from before. There's so many things that are applicable that are going on in the other industries that can be really valuable and help really differentiate some of the people in this in our networks.
Absolutely. Matt set the bar high with some of his previous escapades and interviewing individuals. He went to the top of the sports food chains. We were fortunate enough, was it last week to interview somebody who's at the top of one of the tech.
Absolutely. Matt set the bar high with some.
Yep. So a little feedback there, but so we'll bounce around quite a bit with this. And the goal, like I said, is to do peek behind the scenes of building out these businesses, but then also answer your questions, any thoughts, anything we can share, nuggets along the way. So feel free, as Matt mentioned, to jump in, submit questions, and we'll see where we go. We'll see where this goes, because this is completely unscripted. I've got like 2 notes on my sticky notes, my notes here. That's about it. So we'll see where this thing goes.
Yeah, and again, as we said, we'd love for anybody to chime in, especially if you just want to let us know where you're listening in from. And I know, Kevin, one thing we did talk about, even though this today is definitely not scripted at all, is also bringing in people kind of just whenever, right? So if we're building an audience around this and being able to beam people in, having them comment, say, hey, I'd love to join the conversation, and just really going unscripted with guests as well. So
yeah, good deal.
We'll see.
All right, so let's jump in. All right, so let's start out with what you're up to. What have you been doing the last month and a half or so? Month and a half. What have you been spending your time on, and what are you building out? Saw the site launch, and I see you creating all these ridiculously interesting and creative videos out on LinkedIn and other places. So give us a rundown of what you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, taking the full step back, I guess, I launched Channel Halo, I want to say like right at the beginning of July. So really doing consulting work, go-to-market strategies with both the vendor or MSP, really helping hone messages, hone presentations. I think that's, something I, had an experience, particularly over the last really 3 years of just hearing everybody's presentations and getting a chance to talk to really thousands of MSPs over the last couple of years and understanding, what MSPs are needing to hear, and then understanding what their customers. And so really making sure that, that the vendor or the MSP is able to deliver the message in a meaningful way and an understandable way. So that encompasses a lot of different things. And honestly, the services I listed on my website aren't even, people are asking me to do different things. So it's been really kind of fun and just kind of been going with where I'm needed. The first real big gig that I got, was a brand ambassador. So that wasn't technically listed on my list of services, but it's very cool. Brand ambassador for Build It, out of IT by Design's doing that event late August, early September. I think August 30th through September 1st. And shameless plug, Kevin.
Yeah,
you can register here.
Look at you, techno wizard here. Yeah, I think one of the greatest things about that is, this audience probably knows Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's speaking live, right, at that event. I guess he's from the New York area, but that's pretty kick butt.
No, absolutely. And then just real quick, Wes McDonald chimed in. New and untapped opportunities like managed print and print security, but finding MSPs who don't hate printers is a huge challenge.
Yeah. That's excellent comment there.
Yeah. Actually, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. So if I can jump in real quick, again, since this is the inaugural show and kind of kick things off, a couple things I want to say real quick, just to piggyback on what you're doing, right? I'm joking about the checks, but we've had, some of those basic, 101 conversations about how to incorporate, where to incorporate, just some of the just most basic stuff of building out a business. And sometimes you haven't done it for 30 years. You take, some of the basics for granted. I hadn't had to do it in a while. And so I actually had the same somewhat challenges. Do I incorporate in Delaware? Do I incorporate in Maryland? Just some of those basic challenges that people go through when setting up a company. So it was interesting to kind of have to take a step back. But my point though is that what I want to say is that it's been absolutely fantastic watching you over the last several years. And I've said this in a couple different forums, said it publicly, privately, but you came over from the consulting business that I was running and still own, but kind of came out of a less than sexy marketplace in government contracts. We're doing a lot with technology, so that was great. But to see your transition from the consulting practice to the technology and all the stuff that we had to do in kind of the startup mode and just putting in almost felt like 20-hour work days early on to get this thing off the ground. Ideation I'm speaking about. That was just absolutely fantastic. And then for the next kind of the next season of it, or, they call it, use seasonality as a framework or whatever, but, the time to Kaseya, I mean, you really flourished. I mean, you took, not just being the face of ID Agent, but the face of all of the products and brand of Kaseya out there. So you did I think you represented the organization extremely well, and it's been great just to see you step out on the ledge. And looking back, like 6 years ago, you know, could I see Matt doing these live broadcasts and all these cool things he's doing on video and what have you? It's just absolutely great to see you kind of evolve, and I'm really looking forward to kind of going through this journey with you as you build out this business and what's next. I just want to throw that out there because it's just absolutely fantastic to see you just kick ass. So kudos to you.
I appreciate it. Very rare public praise, by the way, people. No, I'm kidding. Kevin does. I'm kidding. But one of the, and you brought up a couple of things, and this is actually a true story. And Kevin, I don't think you actually remember, but I've told you several times. I've reminded you several times, which is when you first interviewed me at Winvale.
I know where you're going with this.
At least according to the sales manager, he said that you said that I was not a closer. So maybe I just didn't ask you a closing question. Who knows about the job? Or maybe I just wasn't that interested in the job. Who knows? I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, those were words apparently that you said. So, but it worked out. So
sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing you brought up, and this is actually a true story, because I called you yesterday to ask you this question, and and actually, I would encourage any business owner who's out there to talk about some, maybe comment about anything that they struggled with when they were starting up their business. You asked, you said the thing about checks, but I did have a legitimate question about so, I understand when I get paid, that, it goes into an account and I have to, pull money out so they can save, for taxes and all that stuff. But what I didn't really understand was, if as I'm have a corporate card and I'm putting all these expenses, am I just paying it out of my personal account? And I don't even know what that means for tax. So that was a legitimate question that I had.
That was, and I think there was one about, do I keep this receipt, and what do I do with the receipts? And so we'll take you through the QuickBooks for Dummies after the show. But but that's there was seriously. I mean, you haven't had to deal with that in the past, right? And so I mean, there's a learning curve, and it's you look back and it's kind of like those were the moments, those were the funny moments, and getting something off the ground and reflecting back on what was truly unique. I remember, going back 20 years ago when we started Winvale, I remember opening the checking account and getting our first couple of checks and having to pay the first couple of bills. And maybe a lot of business owners can relate to this, but I literally would be up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, working on QuickBooks and trying to, back then, I guess, get the bank statement and trying to enter these things and making sure everything was reconciled to the penny, daily. I mean, I was obsessed about it and trying to make sure that everything was just balanced and good to go. And then got to the point where I just got, overwhelmed and we had to bring somebody on and what have you. But yeah, you look back and it's like, man, it's like, you're in the throes of building something and, you feel like sometimes it's a burden because you have to stop. You have to stop what you're doing and stop working on the thing that's pretty damn exciting thing that you're passionate about to, open an employee account or what have you. So yeah, it was funny. It's humorous when we get those calls or we're chatting. You're like, you ask some of the basic questions, but it's again, you haven't been there, so it's all good. So yeah.
And I mean, and I honestly, sometimes with some of those things, I feel like I'm running around. I'm here, then I'm there, then I'm there, and then and now I'm realizing, okay, now in early on, it's still very early on, but I got to get on top of it quickly because I don't want to. The longer you wait to get the book straight, then it just it snowballs. So I'll be, now that I have your friendly advice that you gave me about it, I'll follow through. But one of the other challenges I would say that really early on I was a little overwhelmed is all the SaaS applications and platforms that you need to sign up for. Whether it's an accounting software, like QuickBooks, StreamYard, which we're doing, for this, YouTube, it's all the social networks. It's Canva, which has been fantastic, by the way. I feel like I'm a graphic designer now. But yeah, just, so many different applications early on. And I'm positive there'll be many more. But, just managing that. And it gives me more of an appreciation, for all the partners that we've had over the years and, managing their licenses and like with each, 16 to 20 vendors that some of the MSPs have that we work with. So it gives me a total appreciation for, what they're dealing with as well.
Yeah. One of the interesting things to your point, right? You're dealing with just today, especially, just how dependent we are on just different applications and different platforms to make things easy. But you're thinking about it and you're experiencing it from a startup standpoint. It's organic, small, but you think about the other end of the spectrum when you get into enterprise. And that was one of the interesting things about the last couple of years, I could say, is seeing something, at scale. I've worked and consulted with organizations, Tyco, Mutual of Omaha, Gallup, Oracle, Semantic, some of the biggest of the big. But when you take a step inside and you realize the level or just the number of different platforms, the number of different applications, and what it really takes to get to instrumentation at scale and looking at metrics. It's a whole different end of the spectrum. So it's really interesting to see, that end of the spectrum and the complexities and really what it takes. And then, taking several giant steps backward and starting, from scratch and starting with the first application that you need and logging in and getting that set up, and then the snowball effect of applications. But that is, I imagine it's a big challenge for a lot of the the owners listening, or just folks in general. The applications, the number of applications you have is overwhelming. And I know it's something we talked about quite extensively with ID Agent. We would talk about just password sprawl and application sprawl, and the average individual having 120 different platforms that they log into on a regular or semi-regular basis or have access to. So
yep.
Yeah, you get into the password management side and keeping all this stuff straight. You start to get appreciating really quick about just how complex things can be in the startup world and as you scale. So hopefully we're going to watch you scale to magnificent heights and hundreds of people and billions of dollars. We'll see where Matt goes with Channel Halo here.
That's the plan. Although, it's funny you said $1 billion, because that's a very common theme I've heard from a lot of vendors is I have $1 billion idea, and that's great if everybody does. But there's also nothing wrong with $100 million idea or a $25 million idea. I get the going for that billion, but man, there's some great ideas that you can do really well with that are not $1 billion idea.
No, you're right. I think I've heard a very similar theme in working with some of the vendors, is that they want to get to a $10 million ARR number and get a 10X on that. So they're a $100 million business, or, we've got the next $1 billion idea. And, for some of them, there's some legitimacy around that. But to your point, some of them, you really need to take a step back and say, yeah, that's a great thing to shoot for, but let's start shooting for $1 million in ARR. Let's start shooting for 5 million ARR and figure out where we go. So it's turned into a lifestyle business, or does it turn into a very, EBITDA positive, very profitable business that could get a, 8, 9, 10, 12X. You're seeing some forward, multiples these days on applications or transactions. Some of these multiples are ridiculous, 15, 20X on forward revenue. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with setting the bar high, but I think to your point, sometimes you have to take a step back and appreciate maybe where you've gotten, right? And if this is the right time to kind of pull your head up and organize yourself and look at some type of transaction. But it's a common theme. It's something that I've heard probably 30 times over the last quarter since I've been kind of out on my own here. So, but yeah, it's 100 million and billion are seem to be the two pretty common targets, I guess, for people shooting for.
Yeah. And I want to get to you in a second. So, but one thing, and I think really this is we'll probably save this conversation for another episode, because I think it's such an interesting topic, which is, well, first, I've been blown away by how willing everybody is to provide advice and, just give their time. So that's been unbelievable. I mean, not surprising in our space. It's just a very giving community. But even people who may have thought I was a competitor, even though I really was trying to find my own path, in terms of consulting in this space, and I don't think I compete with a lot of the current consultants with what they're doing. But even the people who perceived me as a potential competitor were more than willing to spend time with me and talk through kind of their path and how they, some of the lessons they learned. And one thing that came up a lot, and me and you have talked about this too, which is learning how to productize some of your services. So because in the consultant business, time's all my time is it, right? Like that's it. I mean, I can build out a team eventually, but depending on your goals. So I think that's almost a conversation for another day, because I think we could go on forever about productizing, and maybe we can relate it to the MSP space as well. But I also want to find out what's going on with you. I think a lot of people, have seen a little bit. You haven't posted that much. You kind of, you put out a website, but I guess what are you doing exactly?
Yeah, what am I doing? Before I answer that, no, I want to say it's just top of mind, and you mentioned that. But I had an interesting conversation with Jeff Johnson yesterday over at Technology Marketing Toolkit, or just Big Red Media, part of Robin's, I guess, global domination, platform or something. I don't know. But anyway, I was having a conversation with Jeff, and one of the things we talked about was how giving this industry is. And it's not just on the vendor side, it's certainly on the MSP side, because they had that moment at their boot camp where I guess Marcus Lemonis was in the audience, and Robin and him were going back and forth and bantering, and somebody made a comment about giving $50,000 to St. Jude's, and then I think maybe Robin had to step in, or vice versa. I can't remember how it went, but then you had a whole bunch of people in the audience step up and give $5,000, $1,000, $500, and I think, I don't know the exact number, I can't remember, but I think they raised like $350,000 at an event. And so it's not just giving as far as information, but charitable, charity. And if you'd have thought about this, and this is a great conversation again that I had with Jeff, but could this industry have done that 10 years ago? I don't know. I mean, it was maturing. On the consulting practice with Winville and the technology programs and projects that we run for government agencies, we were doing well, but would we be in a position to do something like that? I don't know, but it's been really cool to see how this has really turned into a organized, profitable and giving industry. So
yeah,
anyway,
and I wanted to add, I think they ended up raising over $1 million.
Wow.
But in that moment, it was like 300,000. But it was everybody who stood up was $5,000. Wow. And then there was online, and actually, you don't know this because I didn't tell you. I was actually one of those people.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So we also, well, obviously it's an amazing cause, but we also get to do a pretty cool thing with Marcus Lemonis in December. So I'll be able. I think we're going to be hanging out with him in Miami or something.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, shout out to Robin and Jeff for kicking butt with that. So
for sure.
So what am I up to? So I've had, you've been along for the ride for the last, 6-ish years, but I've had the fortune to build a very successful consulting practice, right? And so on the Winfell side of the house, a lot of it was government contract consulting, so helping companies getting into the government, the public sector space here in the US, but then also selling the technology to government agencies, to state and local, working as a VAR, building out channel programs for, hundreds, if not thousands of organizations. So that was a phenomenal education over the last, 20 years, I guess. Had the fortune to spin out ID Agent from Winville and scale that, and took a lot of the fundamentals of what we did in the consulting practice, and it really helped us scale, create very streamlined, simplified messaging, simplified platform, and achieve velocity. So that was fantastic. And then again, the last couple of years at Kaseya were just nothing but another really amazing education, and under the guidance of Fred and being able to get involved in a ton of aspects of the business, whether it's go to market and helping on that strategy, empowering the sales teams, and then working on corporate development and acquiring organizations, companies. Talk about a couple of them publicly, like Graphis or Rocket Cyber, but there are a couple others I was involved in that were really, really equally as interesting. But so I'm not going to say it because I know you yelled at me about saying it the other day. So fast forward to today. So I've been able to, after I transitioned from Kaseya, I took some time and really worked on developing a methodology, a consulting methodology, and a couple of frameworks. And I borrowed from, a lot of what I've seen in the past. I was working with a client in South Carolina last week, and went into competitive advantage and a lot of stuff to learn from supporting Michael Porter's organization and the Monitor Group back in probably the late 2000s, so it's 2009, 2010, and borrowed some of their philosophies on frameworks and how to put in a framework to help a company scale, and looked at some others, and to spend about call it 60 days really making sure I had that framework down and something I could productize and really add value to vendors and to MSPs. At the same time, I started working with an organization out of Pittsburgh called the Brand ID, and Rachel and her team were absolutely ridiculously fantastic. I was looking for somebody to help me build out a website, and just kind of get those things off the ground. But I also was trying to figure out what is my voice? Who am I? And what have I done? And what is this all about? And so I went through a really interesting exercise with Rachel and her team. And it's, very, very encompassing exercise. You start out with you're trying to figure out what have you done? What do you do? What do you want to do? But then you also write your obituary. And that was a pretty wild thing to do. I mean, it's, how do you want people to remember you? And so you think about it as if it's a really a morbid exercise or what was the point of it? But it was actually a pretty fun exercise, right? Writing how you want people to remember you. And so anyway, I went through this really great process with them, and they came up with the website, the Venture Mentor. I know some folks have had a hard time saying that. Try saying it 3 times fast, but yeah. So it really encapsulates what I'm doing. And so what I've been doing here most recently is I've worked with about a half dozen organizations, half dozen vendors, and helping them figure out, how do they replicate the same success that we created, right? So going through their go-to-market, auditing their channel success program, helping them understand what metrics they need to be looking at internally. And then, for some, helping them figure out, all right, well, we've got metrics, but what do we do next? How do we position ourselves for a Series A? How do we position ourselves for some type of exit? And, what does that framework look like? And so it's been a really fantastic process or project to start with these organizations, because I'm getting exposure to an even broader set of technologies. And some are absolutely incredible. I think some are some game-changing early stage technologies that will have a ridiculous impact on the industry. And some are in fantastic organizations that have been around for a while, but they're looking for the next step. Like, how do I get to that next step? And I often go in and talk to these organizations and say, it's not about blowing up what you're doing today. Oftentimes it's about, turning the dials, finding those small little areas that we can hone in on and start to adjust. So maybe it's in the metrics, maybe it's the external communications, maybe it's leveraging LinkedIn more, like working with somebody like Matt, who can really help you understand that why social selling is so important, why you need to go, lean into that. So that's been a real interesting slice of the last quarter, working with so many organizations. And then fortunately, one of the great byproducts of the last couple of years and having successful exits is I've been able to put aside a fund, if you will, and look for the right organizations to invest in. Since there's some really fantastic early stage technologies that I can bring capital to, and I can bring a lot of muscle and a lot of scale to. So I've got a couple of those out there that are really incredible early stage and ready to scale. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm looking forward to the next iteration. I do often think that there are some things missing in this industry, not just from a security standpoint, but just the overall industry. I think there's a lot of ways that this industry can be streamlined, or we can create better collaboration in this industry. So I'm gonna, on the side, I'll be putting a lot of thought into how do I best streamline this organization, or that this industry, because I think there's as far as it's come, and it's come a hell of a long way, and to see that they're dedicated, PEs and dedicated investment groups just to MSPs, that's a win. That's a major win. But I think there's ways that we can do business even better in this industry. And so as I pursue this consulting practice and build this out, I think on the side and nights and weekends, I'm going to be getting my mind around how do we do this industry better. And so stay tuned for that one.
Got it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is Kevin's version of a long story short. So now we jab each other a lot, so that'll certainly be part of the show.
You need like one of those like buzzers or something like that, or like flashes on that says you're going too long. You're going too long.
Oh, trust me, I'm working on some stuff in Canva. So,
great.
And you mentioned that the fund that you've got. I mean, Channel Halo is looking for investors, so feel free. No, but that's really cool. And there's so many. I mean, I've had so many conversations with companies that are either looking for that, Series A or just initial investments or Series B investments. So it's kind of a cool place, fortunate place for you to be in, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I think if we were in radio, we'd probably have to reset the room, right? Tell people, because we got people who've probably dropped off and people who've come on during the commercial break. But I did want to shout out, for some reason, the Facebook comments aren't coming through on StreamYard, but Rick Jordan did give us a shout out. Love it, guys. Can't wait to see where things go. So thank you, Rick, for giving us the shout out. And I know Rick also has a podcast that he does, so people can check that out. But for anybody who's just kind of tuning in, Kevin and I are teaming up on live streams. We're going to be doing it's going to be everywhere. Eventually it's going to be everywhere, but today it's a minimal viable product, as you would say. And we just, but truthfully, that's when we've been talking to MSPs and partners over the years. I mean, that's what we've said about, that's what everybody says about sales and marketing. You just got to start doing it. I'm positive we'll look back at this episode one day and be like, God, we really did nothing and prepared nothing for that episode, but it's okay, because you got to start somewhere. So
this is an audible, because I'm sitting at the Jersey Shore at the beach house, and so not in my normal surroundings. You can see my setup here, and got my trusty dog Millie by my side. But yeah, this is to Matt's point, minimum viable product, and we struggled for a couple of weeks. How do we come up with a guest list? How do we come up with a series of specific questions, and do we ask the same questions every single time? And I think it was yesterday morning, I said, screw it, let's just do it live. Let's just figure this thing out. And so it's a get away from that analysis by paralysis, but and let's see where this thing goes. You guys could think this is ridiculously stupid and a waste of time, or we'll be top of the charts on Spotify in no time. So we'll see.
Yeah, us against Joe Rogan, it'll become the talk of the town. But I mean, some of the again for somebody who's just maybe tuning in, some of the themes will be certainly talking about my journey with Channel Halo, Kevin's journey with Venture Mentor, behind the scenes, and we want to learn, with you all. So we want comments. A lot of our listeners are small business owners, so we want to hear from you. And by the way, if you're listening right now, we'd love to hear where you're listening in from. So you can throw us a comment. But we're going to be talking about emerging technologies. And I think, just a point, Kevin, you brought up was there's some stagnation going on in the channel, and there's a lot of change that needs to happen. And I do believe like COVID really put an exclamation mark on that, because it really pointed out like, wow, like physical events for vendors has been like, that's been it, right? Like that's been the only way, or not the only way, but it's a massive part. And it still will remain a massive part because you can't replace the relationship that you get at events. But there's different ways that vendors and MSPs can communicate. And I think we just need to start pushing the envelope a little bit more, and becoming creative as a group. And so hopefully, and I know that's one of the things that we want to get out of this is pushing people, including ourselves, of course.
Yeah, look, to your point, we did ridiculously well at events, and that was a primary catalyst for the growth of ID Agent. So I can imagine, and it had an impact, obviously, the last year and a half. While I could say it, but I can imagine for a lot of the emerging vendors, like not having that face to face and not being able to get up on the stage and speak in front of MSPs, that was ridiculously challenging, right? That's hard because you're cutting off a large percentage or portion of your ability to generate MQLs and conversations and conversions. It's going to be something interesting that happens, as we, whatever the new world looks like with this post-COVID, or we still in COVID, whatever. But you've got technology, helping in creating transitions and how we communicate and how we interact. And you got, the Gen Zs with these new innovative platforms and how they communicate and interact, and I think there's going to be a blending of that, and that's going to impact sales processes and, and how we interact and communicate moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see as we get back to events. And there've been some great organizations. I know, ASCII is back on the road, and they're doing their shows here and there. I think there's one coming up in North Carolina. So shout out to Alan and his team out there.
Yeah, Raleigh.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see, like, really, what type of velocity you get, and how it changes. And how do you facilitate a hybrid event world moving forward, or what it looks like? So I'm looking forward to seeing how this all really plays out. I know a lot of people are itching to get back out, in a safe safe way. But I think this fall is going to be really interesting to look back in a couple of years from now at Q2 and Q3 and Q4 of 2021, because things will have changed significantly, and it'd be interesting to see how people reacted to it.
Absolutely. Erica, thank you for tuning in from Southwest Florida. She's excited to be here, or we're excited to have you. And Kevin, you were speaking of events. I don't know if you know this, but Build It IT, actually Build It, I say that, Build It is just around the corner. No pitches, no vendor pitches. Actually, and all kidding aside, when we're talking about pushing the envelope to do something different, taking my brand ambassador hat off for a minute and actually approaching it from a vendor perspective and an MSP perspective, because I attended this event as a vendor with ID Agent, and what Kim and Sunny have done there is they said, we're kind of tired of what everybody else is doing. We want to make this completely educational. So really giving back to the MSP community. And what they did is basically said, no pitches from the vendors. If you're going to do a pitch, or if you're going to be in there, you're going to do a workshop. And so it actually forces it definitely forced us. We had to come up with something completely different because we don't have workshops typically. So it really does force every vendor to come up with something unique. So if you've been to 5 shows over the last year, even if it's virtual, and we all have very similar presentations that we do throughout the course of a year. Now they change, they evolve, but for this event, it's literally having to start from scratch for many vendors because it's a workshop and you have to actually give a takeaway. So there's templates that they're giving away. So, I just think outside of me being the brand ambassador, what they're doing is just really unique and different, so.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sounds like a whole bunch of master classes. So that's,
yeah. And like 7 different disciplines. So it's,
wow.
it's a pretty cool thing. So, but that's the type of, things I think we want to see out here and talk about and push people to do,
Sounds like they should be our first sponsor of our show.
That's a good point. I have a call with them at 10:30. I'll ask.
That's cool.
So we've obviously covered some of the areas we'll be talking about. Again, we'll be bringing in guests, but we don't want to just bring in the same guests that everybody's heard from. Look, there's some people on the channel that everybody should hear from. Definitely the first guest we're going to be bringing in, who I won't say yet, but we'll save that from when we have a little bit more production around this. But we really do want to hone in on bringing people from outside that you haven't heard from, that we can all learn a lot from. And shout out to Mike. Good to see you boys. Looking forward to build it. We put an amazing workshop together. Excited to share the content. Yep. So that's Mike from Audit.
Look, I think that's we'll wrap on that, and we'll see where this thing goes. But let us know where if you have any questions or guests. If you want to be a co-host with us, we'd love to have you. And we'll see how we scale this thing. And said shooting for top 10 on Spotify, on YouTube, on every other platform. So I don't know. We gotta juice up the likes and the loves and all that stuff. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll have more information on where to subscribe. But in the short term, Kevin, I put your website. That's probably the easiest way to connect with you.
Yep.
So you can connect theventurementor.com for myself, channelhalo.com. And I've got a newsletter that I'm going to be publishing on a weekly basis. So would love, again, that's for both vendor, MSP, doesn't matter, or anybody in marketing and sales, truthfully. So please subscribe to the newsletter when you go to the website, or you can reach out to me. Anything else, Kevin, before we?
No, or if you're in South Jersey around Stone Harbor, come on by and come hang out. But hopefully next episode I'll be back in my Maryland professional studio, and we'll go from there. But no, this is said we'll wrap up the banter, but we're excited about bringing this on a regular basis and give me a peek behind building these organizations, these companies, and maybe bringing on some of the companies that we're individually consulting with and featuring them. So we'll see where this goes, but this is going to be an exciting next step. So thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Thanks.